welcome to yet another episode of the Modern Firm podcast, where we explore what it takes to build a successful modern accounting firm. And one of the key ways that we do that on this show is that we bring on some amazing guests. These are experts in their field who we hope can share just a small taste of what it is that they're passionate about. So today I am really excited about our guest. I've been following him for quite a while. He has scaled and sold a 7-figure cloud accounting firm. He now is the founder of Future Firm and is guiding firm owners to scale and systematize in those same ways. He recently released the 2025 Modern Firm Report and launched RyanBot, an AI-powered version of himself. So maybe that's a little bit of a clue in who we have on today. Welcome to the show, Ryan Lazanis.
TJ, it's a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, so I'm very excited about this episode. So this is the Modern Firm podcast, so it seems appropriate that we're going to spend a fair bit of time talking about the Modern Firm Report. So that is really kind of the context of our episode today. I just kind of want to dive in here. So I am excited to kind of unpack this. Now, we obviously, in the time we have here, will not be able to do it really justice, but we will be able to get an overview here. I'm really curious, when you talk about kind of uncovering what the Modern Firm is and doing this Modern Firm report, what was the impetus for you for doing this research?
I think it was looking back at when I started my firm, Zen Accounting, in 2013. It was one of the earliest cloud accounting firms in North America when I started it. And I was really just trying to find a different way to run an accounting firm. I had my history was, I had spent half a decade working in a small traditional firm, and I knew it didn't really serve the owners or the team well, and it didn't really serve the clients well. So I wanted how could I create a pain-free accounting experience and utilize this technology that was cutting edge at the time, which was the cloud. Working online, and we used Skype at the time to meet with clients. So I'm dating myself a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
But that model didn't really exist at the time, and I was like, who could I get ideas from? And I was Googling around, and I would find this firm in Australia, and then I would find one in the UK and another one in New Zealand, and I would reach out to them and I would ask questions and try to just see what's behind the curtains. And I guess the idea really just came for that. How about one place where people could just get inspiration from? So other firms that are out there that are looking to create something interesting, create a different kind of model, do something unique, do something cutting edge. Where could they get insights like that? And that was why we put out the 2025 Modern Firm Report, is just a collection of firms that we respect, that are doing cool things in the industry, that are pushing things forward, but that are also creating an interesting lifestyle for themselves and their clients. So, it was really just to have one place for other firms out there to see what some of the unique firms out there are doing.
Yeah. So in doing that research, or kind of in preparing for doing the research, did you have any sort of hypotheses or anything that you were looking to prove or maybe disprove in doing some of this research?
Not really, actually. I mean, we only asked a few questions, and the questions were, how big is the team? What kind of services do you provide? How do you typically price your services? How many hours a week do you work? What was the biggest, the most important strategic decision that you made since running your firm? And what's the biggest lesson that you had to learn the hard way while running your firm? So we kept it pretty simple. And, from that, we got some good insights from it, but there was no real hypothesis, I'd say. I did kind of suspect that the pricing would be that these top 50 modern firms, I suspected that they were pricing a lot better than the typical benchmark. So that was one thing that I had in mind. But otherwise, there was nothing else that we were really looking to prove.
Yeah. So when you think about the Modern Firm, I guess, how do you define that, and more just in the interest of how did you define that in order to find the firms that would participate in this study?
Yeah. So I think I've been in the industry for over a decade now, and I think I have a relatively good finger on the pulse for some of the firms that are doing some interesting things out there. And, we were just looking for firms that were paving their own path. We weren't looking for like there's a lot of top 50 lists and top 100 lists out there, and like a lot of them is like, what are the biggest firms? What are the most profitable firms? Profit is obviously very important. You can't have a healthy business without healthy profit, but the revenue side of things is really that's not what determines success for a lot of the firms that we coach. And we had firms in the top 50 that were solo firms that were doing interesting things, like one person in the firm and they don't want a team. We have others in the top 50 that were over 100. I think like a big theme for us and what's important for us and for our community is lifestyle, freedom, flexibility. So we were looking for firms that were kind of staying true to that, ones that were being intentional about how they wanted to grow. Like for instance, we have like Erica Good on the list. She runs a solo firm and she has no interest in hiring people, and she works 15, 20 hours a week, and she's very intentional in her decisions, and she knows her boundaries. She knows how to price well. Like she has a good lifestyle from her firm. She's getting the lifestyle she wants. That's a modern firm for me. There's others that are doing very interesting things on the marketing side of things. They're very visible online. They have big followings on YouTube or Instagram or social media. There's others that are like on the cutting edge for technology. They're using AI in unique ways. They, helping their clients automate workflows in most ways that most firms wouldn't. So we're kind of looking for like some kind of combination of that.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. And also, I think I don't have the statistics in front of me, but, maybe talk about the makeup of, you mentioned there's some solo firms and there's a couple in there that are over 100. And I think the thing that I resonate with, and I know I spend a lot of my time speaking mostly with firms that are in that under 100, kind of cohort or segment there. And I think that, there's many thousands of firms that are in that kind of same segment. And so it really does it does sort of represent a good number of firms and a lot of folks that can say, yes, that looks like me. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the makeup of the firms? We don't have to get
Yeah, so I
exact.
just quickly pulled up the stats, but basically, 2/3 were between a team size of 5 and 50, so it's pretty wide. Um, but that kind of gives you where the sweet spot is. We had 26% that were between 5 and 10 team members. We had 20%, which were between 11 and 20, and we had another 20% who were between 21 and 50. So that represents this general size of 2/3 of the firms out of the top 50.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's helpful because, like you said, when we talk about the top firms, often it's revenue or things like that, and you really start looking at things that don't really look like me. When I'm thinking about my firm and that kind of thing. So that's perfect. I appreciate that. So let's start to dive in. Maybe we'll start kind of high level. Just broadly speaking, what were some of the key takeaways that you found after kind of culling through the data, if you will?
Yeah, so the first takeaway is that they just charge significantly more. And I participated in Ignition's 2024 benchmark pricing report, and I mean, I wasn't really that surprised about what I found, because after coaching, I've coached hundreds of firms in our program over the last few years, and pricing and packaging is a big problem. But for, let's say, recurring accounting and bookkeeping services, um, a third are charging between 250 and 499 a month. So that's like danger zone pricing. Um, when we look at and if we look at like a little bit further than that, over 50% are charging less than 750 a month. If we looked at the top 50, 72% are charging above 1,000 a month. So that's almost the inverse. And then if we looked at like how many hours these firm leaders work a week, if we looked, like I did I pulled some aggregated data from ChatGPT's deep research. So we have to maybe take this with a little bit of grain of salt here. But if we look at the workload for firm owners, average hourly work week, we're looking at Let me just pull up these numbers. We're looking at we're looking at 2/3. Sorry, we're looking at 90% work over 40 hours a week. 2/3 are working over 50 hours a week. It seems to correlate from what I typically see. Then if we look at the top 50 modern firms, the vast majority are working 40 hours or less. So I feel that there's a big correlation between pricing and how much work you do. Because if we know how to price better, then we need less clients to make the same amount of money. So I feel there's a big correlation between those two. And then the third thing that I found was there was two questions we asked. One, what was the best strategic decision you've made in your firm? And two, what was the biggest lesson that you've learned the hard way? We took all those responses and I ran it through ChatGPT. The common theme, the number one theme that stuck out, it wasn't automation or tech or anything else. It was the team building, delegation, and protecting boundaries theme was by far the biggest mention made within all those responses. So these are firms that no matter what the size, they know how to protect boundaries. They know how to put the right people in place. They know how to delegate that work properly so that it's not fully on their plate and they're not the bottleneck, and they're able to grow better as a result and grow healthier as a result. So these were like the three biggest findings that we found from the data.
Yeah. Any big surprises in the middle of all that data?
I would say that the team building, the delegation, protecting boundaries theme is not really what I expected. As like I don't know what I would have really expected it. I just didn't think that would come out on top, truthfully. Maybe I would think, the automation piece, the tech piece would have been something that people would have mentioned more. And it was a popular theme. It just wasn't the most popular.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's dive into a couple of these in a little bit more detail. So you mentioned pricing, right? So that does seem to be sort of the big thing that kind of unlocks a number of other things throughout this story as we kind of go through here. And you mentioned it was over 2/3 are charging more than $1,000 a month for their clients. Is that right? I think the other thing is that I saw was, of that, almost half or maybe 2/3 of that cohort are in the more than $2,000 a month, which I think is also
There was
worth
a
calling.
third above $2,000 a month.
Yeah. So what is it that allows these folks to do that confidently?
Well, one thing that they did comment on, and one thing that people said was a big unlock was the three-tiered pricing approach, the gold, silver, bronze approach, and the value pricing approach, pricing the individual client and their individual situation. That's all well and good. What was not mentioned there was how do you actually land that price? Because there's a sales process that's required to, it's one thing to formulate a package and formulate a price, but if we can't properly communicate it and land the client on it, it doesn't really matter. That's one thing I don't think was talked about very much, but the big driver that most people said was the tiered pricing and the value pricing approach.
Interesting. So is there any specific magic to this four-figure threshold, the $1,000 a month, or is it just a nice round number to look at?
I think it's, ultimately it's about the offer. What is the offer that we're presenting to the client? And I think when I look at firms that are struggling to get to that price point, their offer is incredibly commoditized. We're like these firms that are charging over $1,000 a month. First off, there's a bundle of services that are included within the package. And they are trying to skirt the commoditization of what we do, right? Like, so if you look like a bookkeeping firm, if you look at like a package that most bookkeeping firms try to create, they are listing their tasks, right? They're listing the things that they do to get the work done. So, reconciliation of your credit cards, reconciliation of your bank accounts, fixed asset depreciation schedule. They're listing their tasks, which your clients don't value. But if we look at like some of the other firms that are charging more, they're listing features that have much higher perceived value in the eye of the client. So perhaps they're doing, you know, strategy sessions to automate their accounting or books. Perhaps they're doing, monthly growth reports instead of calling them something like monthly financial statements. So they're labeling their services in a way that are more in tune to their market, but they're also crafting an experience to help the client achieve a desired result rather than just listing their tasks. So I think the way that we design the offer, the way that we design the package plays a big role here.
Yeah, I think that's a really key thing to call out. And I think if any of our listeners, go look at any good SaaS app, and you're going to see they don't talk about the tasks, they talk about the value. What is the outcome? It's driven by the outcomes that you are going to see. And I think if you can kind of recognize that within your firm and be able to say, here's the outcome you're going to get, they're going to be able to identify like, oh, this is what I'm going to walk away with. I don't care that you're crossing I's and dotting T's, whatever it is that you're doing behind the scenes. I just want to know how is this going to improve my business.
Like, I'll give you a very good example. And when I was running my firms and accounting, the purpose was to provide easy, pain-free accounting. So what combination of services and features do we need to include to realize that objective for our clients? Because that was at a time when things were still very manual and automation was new, and we were kind of on the cutting edge there. So we can kind of highlight how we would get things done and the services and features that will allow us to provide that experience. So that's what we want to do with your package, is we want to curate an experience or a result. And oftentimes when I see firms not only crafting the package, but explaining the package, it's more like, okay, you're going to get the bank statement, you're going to get your books once a month, and you're going to get, a tax return at the end of the year, and you're going to get the financial statement. Like, they're just rattling off one commodity after the next. And when you do that, again, the client doesn't value it. And you're just basically competing on price at that point.
Yeah. So I'm curious, right? So it sounds like most of these are driven by packages. We're communicating the value. Are any of the top 50 still charging by the hour for any meaningful amount of work?
I did not see any mention of that. We did not ask that question, but we did not see any mention of that in any of the responses.
Yeah, interesting. Very good. So I think, what, spoiler alert, we're going to see a lot of crossover, right? So once you get pricing right and packaging right, it has impacts across a number of these other things. And then also these other things contribute to that as well. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about time and capacity. You mentioned that, I don't remember the statistic right off the top of my head, but most of these firm owners are working fewer than 40 hours or fewer, right? You don't have very many that are working more than 40 or certainly more than 50. What is it that allows them to do this and to continue to grow their business?
Well, the package, so the pricing and packaging does play into it. The busiest firms I see out there are the ones that are really undercutting themselves, and it just means they need a lot of volume to bring in the revenue required. So and the package is there to kind of protect your time as well, because, for instance, like, if you're charging $400 for a tax return and the client can ask you a million questions throughout the year, that's not a good example of protecting your time. But if you have a package where, you get the bronze plan doesn't allow you to ask questions throughout the year, whereas the silver, you get to ask 3 questions a year. Well, now we've done a much better job at protecting your time. So it's about setting boundaries. The packages set boundaries. But beyond that, managing capacity is mostly, like, what I always like to say is tech is great, automation is great, it's going to streamline everything, but it's not going to solve your capacity problem. Most firms think that technology and automation is the solution to solving their capacity problem. Really, the only real solution is either working with less clients and or increasing the size of your team. That's the real way. Like if you're working 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week, you're not going to get it down to 30 just from automation and tech alone. There's some fundamentals that have to be fixed first. So I kind of went in around. I don't even remember what your question was anymore, but I know it had to do with capacity, and I kind of went
Yeah,
around.
really just trying to identify how they're able to continue growing while reducing the number of hours. I think there is a common that is a strong correlation in most folks' minds where it's like, well, in order to grow, I just have to work more. But we're kind of seeing the inverse with a lot of these top 50.
And that's where the delegation and team building comes into play. And not everyone wants a huge team, and that's fine. Most firms I deal with, they want a couple people at the firm at least to take some work off their plate. But a lot of firm owners are the bottleneck, and they have everything funneling through them. They have sales, they have marketing, they have strategy, they have reviewing files, dealing with all the different clients out there. It just becomes too much at a certain size. So at a certain point, it's a question of, do I want this many clients? And if I want to continue to grow, then we need to install people, and we need to understand how to delegate that. We need to find good people and then determine how we're going to get that work off my plate and onto their plate effectively. That's one thing that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. I think so. You kind of identified two main goals. We can gloss over this maybe really for a firm owner, and so one is growth, right? We want to see the business grow, and the other is that time freedom. So we've kind of talked about how you're able to grow through pricing and packaging. You can kind of set some boundaries and define some things, and really help with that. Uh, the time freedom piece, but there's also a role of the word no, right? What is the role of no in helping to increase your time freedom?
That's a critical thing, being disciplined about making the right decisions and taking on the right things, because we have an unlimited amount of opportunities that present ourselves and that present themselves to us as business owners. We have this partnership, we have this strategic alliance, we have this new app, we have this marketing channel, we have a particular client that might not be the best fit for us, but could bring in a bunch of money. So what do we say yes to and what do we say no to? And ultimately that comes down to understanding what's my ultimate objective, defining the ultimate objective, and then being clear on the pathway to get there. If we're not clear on that, then we don't know what we should say yes or no to. So, but assuming we do know the pathway, being disciplined is not always easy. We've all made mistakes there. I've brought on clients that I knew I probably shouldn't have brought on, and regretted that later. So, but it's very important to be able to say no, and stay very disciplined and really guard your time.
Yeah. I think that's so important. I think that the discipline there and the guarding your time is important because it's so easy, especially for firm owners who do get to that point where they're like, "Oh, I am working under 40 hours. Well, I could add a few more clients. It's not going to hurt, and then it kind of gets back into that, like, well, you're kind of doing it to yourself at this point, right? You've got the systems, you've got the pricing in place, you've got the ability to do what you want, to be able to hit the revenue and profit goals that you have. But then you sort of say, well, I can just add a few more and we can make it even more money, or increase our revenues. So I think that discipline is so important to be able to say, this is what I want. I don't want to do that anymore.
I think one of the hardest things for me personally is someone reaching out and saying, "Hey, could I have 15 minutes of your time?" And it could be a colleague, it could be someone that wants to pick. Could I pick your brain for 15 minutes? Those are like, someone needs help, but you can't provide that help to everybody, unfortunately. So we do have to make those tough calls sometimes.
Yeah. So you mentioned delegation as a key piece of the time and capacity, certainly for firm owners. What is it that they're doing? How are they designing roles and processes to make delegation easier?
Well, the first thing is actually documenting the roles and responsibilities for each individual. Like when I see a firm that's having troubles with delegation, it's often because the expectations are not clear on the person they're trying to delegate to. So we have to start with clear roles and responsibilities and make sure that um, your colleague and team member um, is aware of this. The other thing is mindset, though. This is the one I struggled with for many, many years. And it's still something that I have to try to get comfortable with, is the fact that a lot of accountants and bookkeepers and tax professionals are perfectionists. We've been kind of taught to be perfect, right? Like on the number side of things. But that doesn't really translate very well when it comes to delegation. That might be why they're generally bad delegators, is because they look for perfect. Like, I'm doing something perfect right now, and if I give it to you, it needs to be perfect. But actually, most cases, it doesn't need to be perfect. Like, there's a quote from Dan Martell, which is, um, now it's escaping me, but something along the lines of, uh, if you can get something 80% done, that's 100% freaking awesome. So if you can delegate something and it's done 80% there, that's 100% freaking awesome. So that's kind of like the approach that I had to learn to take, is what you delegate doesn't need to be perfect most of the time. There are some instances where you need to be a bit pickier, but for most of the time, it's good enough. So you have to be comfortable with good enough a lot of the time.
Yeah. I think that's so important, especially for those firm owners who are used to sort of controlling every output and communicating to the clients. You know, that first handoff is really, uh, can be really challenging when you start to let go a little bit. But it is so important to realize that as you grow, you know, most of your clients aren't going to know what output you would have given anyway. They're just going to understand that they're getting the result that they need.
Yeah, and it has to do with anything, like whether it's a social media post that someone's scheduling for you or it's a blog post. It's like, doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. So are there any common hiring or retention strategies that you see um, in this group of the top 50?
There was not much I was able to. We didn't have much information when it came to that, but you know, generally these are firms that have a pretty good culture. They are not working their team to the bone. They don't have those crazy busy seasons. And they have a lot of freedom and flexibility. They, you know, uh, like as an example, like at Future Firm, we have very little turnover. Um, because we have a lot of flexibility. We're not micromanaging. We have unlimited vacation policies. Things like, I think, like the freedom and flexibility component is still extremely crucial. So how could we provide that to the team? That's what a lot are looking for these days. So how could we yeah how could we double down on that?
Did you see any? I feel like I remember seeing some distinction between sort of this concept of hiring junior versus senior employees when you're looking to hire.
I believe that's one big difference as well among the top 50, is that they invested in good senior resources, and that's something I truly believe in as well. That's a path that I had followed with my firm. Is if you need, at a certain point, if you're looking to grow to the next level, you need someone that's going to buffer you between yourself and the rest of the team and the clients. So not everything funnels up to you. Like, you should not be doing reviews of all tax returns or all files or all books for all of your clients. You should, like, at a certain point, that's just not sustainable. So if you have a good senior in place, they could be that buffer. But it's a more expensive hire. It's a harder hire to find, and it's a harder hire to retain. But it's something that's very important if we want to get to a certain level.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So this next section I'm actually really excited about because I think it really it kind of unlocks so much and makes everything else that we've talked about just so much easier. And that is the concept of niching, right? So talking about really understanding who your niche, who you're serving. But I think we often talk about sort of the importance of understanding that from an ideal client perspective, right? So who is it that you're serving? I think we don't, and maybe this is just me, this is my perspective, we don't as often talk about this from the service side, niching down on just saying like, we're just going to be advisory or tax only or whatever. And then the same thing on the technology side, right? Where we say we're only going to serve people who are engaging on QBO or Zero or ADP or Gusto or right those kinds of things. So there's a few different ways that you can sort of segment how you serve, who you serve, and how you go about doing that. What do you see as commonalities in the top 50 here for that?
So the niching, I'd have to review the results there. I would say it was, I know it was mentioned a few times. Um, if we look at like whether that was like some of the best strategic decisions they made, or one of the biggest lessons they've learned, niching was actually a little bit lower down on the list. But I still do think it's important for a variety of reasons that you listed. I know from my personal experience, I've made some. I think I did some things well there, and I think I did make some mistakes. Like on the client side, we never hyper focused on one particular industry, but we did get very clear about the general kind of client we want and who we did not want. So like we wanted like online businesses, but we didn't want like manufacturing or inventory heavy businesses. So we knew what to say yes to, what to say no to. What we did on the tech side is that we went all in on Zero. This was at a time when QuickBooks Online was, I'd say, behind Zero product wise. So everyone had to be on Zero. That allowed us to streamline our processes because it's easier to train people on, easier to onboard people, our new clients on, when everybody on the team knows it well. What I think we did poorly at was we provided a very comprehensive service. We mandated bookkeeping across all clients so that we could provide the compliance and advisory in a much easier fashion because we controlled the data. We handled tax, but we were not good at tax and really struggle in that area. And if I had to do it again, I probably would not have offered tax because as a small firm, it's not easy to find great tax resources that want to join a smaller outfit, generally speaking. So we really struggled in tax over the years. And if I had to do it again, I would just double down what we were really good at and probably leave tax aside.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I just pulled up. So it does say 55% of firms specialize by service category, right? Whether that's advisory, tax only, bookkeeping, etc. So reasonably common to see that. Um, what are some of the implications of getting this right? Now you said it wasn't maybe the highest priority thing, but what are some of the things that niching makes easier?
Well, marketing is the big one because you speak directly to that person. And that's more important now than ever because the online marketing space is very crowded. It's hard to stand out. Everybody's online. There's a million things coming at us at once at any given moment. And like we just need to be very bold about who we're for. And that's going to cut through the noise. So marketing is really the big one, but also getting a deeper understanding of that niche so that we could provide a deeper service, which I think is going to be more important in the AI age. You know, that depth is going to be much more important, I believe.
Yeah. So any advice that you have for firms that maybe currently are serving kind of a little bit of anybody and everybody, across service lines? Any advice for sort of starting to navigate niching down a little bit?
I'd say it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And then you like, if you feel uncomfortable, like going hyper specific, that you can just make it an iterative process and just start with, okay, here's what I like, here's what I don't like. Let me just make sure that I'm not going to accept the stuff that I don't like. Let's just focus on this and then narrow it down from there. So it doesn't have to be, if you feel uncomfortable and it feels forced to you, don't force the decision.
Yeah. Very good. And I like that, sometimes it's like instead of, yeah, just that don't like piece of it, right? Who do I not like to serve? And let's just avoid accepting any more of those to start with.
Like for some firms, I see it's just a very natural decision where they're like, you know what, I'm very good with like, in construction. I know these clients very well and I have a network of them. I'm just going to focus on these clients. And for others, like, I don't know what to pick. This industry, that industry, like, they don't maybe have a network in those industries, and it feels very uncomfortable. And I would say not to force it in that case.
Yeah. Um, so I don't know that technology and automation are necessarily like uh, explicitly presented in the modern firm report per se, but I do think we talk a lot about how technology is we so the way we define the modern firm is really about your business model, which we've talked about, the people that serve uh, the people you serve, right? So your clients, and then the people that serve those clients. So that kind of is the whole thing, and then the technology is the piece that sort of brings it all together and allows us to serve them in good ways. And so I am curious if there was anything that you saw in there that were commonalities. Are there any tools or systems that stood out across the top 50 that were common?
Um, there was not. I'd have to refresh my memory on that, truthfully, TJ.
Yeah, no worries.
But I know that AI was something that was mentioned quite a bit. Obviously, that's trending very hard right now, and I think, like, a lot of these firms are using AI in unique ways and experimenting, and everyone's still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So I think one of the things, this is maybe a little off topic, but I do want to touch on it, that you have done recently that I think is really interesting from a firm owner perspective is you have kind of cloned yourself, right? You've created Ryan Bot, which allows you to sort of be omnipresent within the firms that you interact with, for those firms that take advantage of that. Is there anything similar that you feel like is beneficial, or some of the takeaways that you've had in building that would be beneficial for implementing within a firm, whether it's primarily for their staff or for their clients or other stakeholders?
Yeah, so, like, I just, like, clone myself as an experiment, basically. And my podcast is not my voice. And actually, I have a Spanish podcast now, but I don't speak Spanish, so that's all AI generated, just as an experiment. Let's see, like, we have an international community inside of our program. Will we find more Spanish speaking members to join? I don't know. We'll see, I guess. So, like, a lot of what I do is just like an experiment, just because I'm interested, and just I think we do have a duty to learn this stuff because it's moving so fast now. And like, I have a bot where members can interact with it and ask questions 24/7. I do think at a certain point in time we'll all have a clone. Um, Now, I'm not gonna say that's gonna happen in the next 6 months or a year, but, like, certainly down the road, I think we'll all have a clone. Um, should firms be spending time in this area now to clone their expertise and have clients interact with it and ask questions? Probably the majority should not. Um, can we create custom GPTs so that we can have, like, responses that are generated across the firm that are consistent in the tone of voice that we'd like to have when we respond to our clients? That's probably an interesting idea. So I mean, there's so many possibilities out there. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I do think the key, for me, one of the things I would recommend folks who are even a little bit interested in this, and you kind of have a bit of a head start on this, right? Is that you've created a lot of content. So capturing your thoughts, so from the firm owner and the staff perspective, just capturing those strategies and the things that they communicate to their clients, capturing that information will be beneficial at some point in the future when you could kind of lean back on onto that information, and not have to create it from scratch, right? So I think that's as simple as just recording client calls and things like that. Do you have any other strategies you think of?
I think the recording client calls is a good idea. It's just we're feeding perhaps confidential information at that point. So that's one tricky thing. But yeah, like, could be, like, you're right. I have a lot of content, my podcast, my blog, materials inside the program, and I can train the AI based on that. But most people don't have that volume of content, and the AI has to learn from something. So if you're not creating content, then the only other place is calls and emails, but we have to strip out the confidential information.
Yeah. And so for our listeners, I while I can't be 100% confident, I am reasonably confident today that I am speaking with the real life Ryan Lazanis. So, so I'm pretty sure it's you in the flesh. So
There's a 90% chance.
good, good. Um, Good. So as we kind of move towards wrap up here, I do, we've talked about a number of things today that are all represented in the Modern Firm report. I'm curious if there's any quick wins or maybe better, is there any spot in and amongst all of this that you advise the listeners to start if they want to kind of pursue any of this stuff?
I'd say the two big ones is probably if you're struggling with pricing and you only give out one pricing option, try three. See what happens when you give three options. And I and I suspect you're gonna get like put your typical price and typical package on the bronze and aim for two more premium options and see what happens. That's one thing. And number two is if you're the bottleneck right now and you have a team in place and delegation is a struggle, try to get over the mindset of things have to be perfect when you delegate to the other. Define what good enough is, and then I think you'll find that you'll be able to more easily get things off your plate with very little negative consequence whatsoever. So those I think are pretty easy wins that anyone can implement right away.
Awesome. And then kind of on the flip side here, maybe to prevent our folks from having to learn things the hard way, are there any pitfalls or challenges that they should keep an eye out for, or any advice on navigating those?
It's a general question, TJ. So pitfalls to watch out for. I think the one thing is the if you are struggling with capacity and you think that the technology is the solution to fixing it, then that's the pitfall. There's foundational issues that likely need to be addressed first. And I'm not against technology. I'm a big proponent of it, but it's not the first thing that you should be looking at doing if you're looking to solve big problems at your firm.
Yeah. I think that's really, really wise because I think it is often the go-to, right? That is often the thing that people reach for first as well. This is a challenge. What technology out there can I reach for and just try to write a check to solve the problem, right? So I think that's great advice. So again, I mentioned at the top, we're not going to be able to go super deep, and we've spent the last 40 some minutes here, kind of doing an overview. This is definitely just scratching the surface. Inside the Modern Firm report, you've got, we just talked about the tiers. You've got examples of how people can sort of price and package services. That as an example, there's a lot more material in there. Where can listeners find the report?
So I believe it's Future Firm. Let me just make sure. It's futurefirm.co/report.
Awesome. And I will make sure to put a link to that in the show notes, so you can find a link there. And then also, if they want more practical guidance on putting all of this into practice, where can they find that?
The best place is to get access to my free newsletter, futurefirm.co/newsletter. And I send emails each week that are practical, actionable, interesting, to help you implement improvements into your firm and help unlock freedom and growth in your business.
Awesome. And then where can listeners find you? So you've got the newsletter. Are you active on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc.?
LinkedIn is really the only platform that I'm interested in, that I'm active in. So they can go to just look for Ryan Lazanis. As far as I know, I'm the only one there.
Okay, perfect. And I'll make sure I can include a couple of those links in the show notes as well so that people can find you. So real quick before we close, I like to find out from people that are inspiring to our audience, I like to find out what is inspiring you right now. Is there anything that's inspiring you?
Um, I think like I don't know if inspiring is the right word, but what I'm particularly interested in is the big theme for me at the moment is how to be more human in a technology and AI driven world, which sounds weird because I have Ryan Bot, but that is the big theme across our business right now is how could we just be more human? How could we like not be as transactional? How could we help build relationships and community? And I think that's the big trend that we're cluing into right now. So just reading content and digesting content in that kind of area is really what I'm pretty clued into.
Yeah. Interesting. Awesome. I think that's really important too. And we're all going to be trying to figure out how to navigate that over the coming months and years, I think, is how to remain human in a world dominated by digital avatars. So excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate you joining us today for this episode of the podcast.
TJ, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always.
Awesome. And I want to thank our listeners as well today for being with us. We hope you'll join us as we continue to explore what it means to be a modern firm, and as we strive to provide you with practical guidance in each of those core areas. So if you like what you've heard today and want to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes, do make sure that you follow or subscribe in your favorite podcast app. Give us a rating and leave a comment. We do take a look at those to help guide content for future episodes. So thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you on the next episode.